As you may recall from our All Monkeys episode a few months back, a pair of clapping hands on that particular recording belonged to Ann Moses, editor of Tiger Beat magazine from 1966 to 1972. I'm sure you all remember Tiger Beat magazine, and as I mentioned when Ann was a guest on our Monkey special, we focused exclusively on her coverage of Mickey, Davy, Mike, and Peter. But Ann Moses met, interviewed, and worked with nearly everyone in the glorious heyday of 60s rock and pop, so I thought today we'd bring Ann Moses back and expand our discussion to go a little deeper into her career. Ann Moses, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
You know, I was going to ask you what a typical day in the life of a Tiger Beat editor was like, but I would think that considering you were involved in the world of rock and roll, every day had to have been an atypical day.
Yes. I was a real 9-to-5 kind of girl.
Mm-hmm.
Just that's the way my life had gone, going to classes in college, and then when I worked at Disneyland, things like that. And then I got to Hollywood, and I was ready to go into the office first thing in the morning because I'm very much a morning person.
Right.
But the publisher and my editorial director, they would say, no, we want you at the clubs. We want you at record opening parties. We want you out there all around town. And we don't care what time you come in the morning. Come in at 10, come in at 11. And while I didn't hesitate to go to those evening outings every chance I got, because I was still a teenager and there wasn't anything more fun, I was up and ready to go to work at 8:45 in the morning. So I inevitably would show up at 9. I'm a real organization freak, so I probably spent a while organizing my desk. But typically, there was somewhere that I should be every single day. And so if in the early days, it was them assigning me stories, please go out and interview Herman's Hermits, or we've got you set up to do an interview with the Rascals, or whatever the case was. Then, after about the first year, it was basically me deciding what those assignments would be. And, of course, they were the most fun ones. Any one that I didn't think was going to be fun, I would assign to an editorial assistant or a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was out of the office, and they wouldn't see me for much of the day. And they didn't think anything about it because I would always come back with something, an interview on my tape recorder, which is sad. I always had every one of my interviews, the whole thing on tape, and then they were transcribed, and then I taped over them.
Oh.
And when I think about what that would be like today, not only myself, to listen to myself and the people that many years ago, it really makes me sad.
Yeah, what an incredible resource. Obviously, you still have the magazine, you still have the stories that were written.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever I see an article in Tiger Beat that was a Q&A, and it was me doing the queuing, it was word for word. Because the transcriptionist would write down every word, and that's what would go into Tiger Beat. And it was never sensationalized. The actual quotes were never sensationalized when it was that type of an article.
We're talking with Tiger Beat editor Ann Moses today on the Vintage Rock and Pop Shop. We mentioned Herman's Hermits before, and hence we just played them. And they were the sort of act you'd expect to be covered in Tiger Beat. Peter Noone was something of a teen heartthrob, and there were so many at that time. And yet, a group like The Who got its first national coverage in Tiger Beat.
Right. The Who were actually first introduced in Tiger Beat in April of 1966, and Derek Taylor had a monthly column, and he became their American press officer when they came to the United States. And, of course, he was aware of them long before any of us had heard about who they were, how different they were, the crazy antics that went on. And he wrote about them. That caught my interest. about that time I was starting, well, it was a little after that. It was probably a year after that I was starting to write for the New Musical Express in England. So I was first introduced by Derek. Then when they would come over to the United States and I was writing a weekly column called America Calling, then typically whatever British group came into town, would contact me. They'd want me to basically report on what they were doing in Hollywood to get that publicity back home.
Right.
And for me, it was just, another great British group. This is awesome. And, sometimes they'd make it into Tiger Beat. And certainly we introduced The Who in Tiger Beat. I think probably for no other reason that they look so different, they dress differently. They just weren't your average teeny bopper band. They were a whole new thing in rock and roll.
Hmm.
And so then when I was in the front row at the Monterey Pop Festival and photographed their performance and watched their performance, and they just, they tore the house down. From then on, I was a super fan. They became more popular to Tiger Beat readers and, of course, to everybody who became Who fans for the next few years. And I suppose to this day.
There are photos of you with The Who, and Pete Townsend and Keith Moon are chewing on your hair. Keith Moon had a reputation for being kind of crazy, which is putting it mildly. Was he like that with you?
He was, but nice crazy.
Right.
Of course, I was still rather naive. I wasn't really aware of the people that were taking drugs, either in their private time or things like that. It turns out Keith kind of overdid some things, but in my interactions with him, he was just this crazy, fun guy. And of course, his drumming, I can remember one article I read, or it might have been a press release, but they called him the Who threshing machine. And I've never thought of a more perfect example than that. That's how he was on stage. And then off stage, he was just this goofy, fun guy. He was a delight to be around. So it was too bad the path that his life took, because he was an awesome person on lots of levels.
You mentioned the Monterey Pop Festival in the summer of '67. I had no idea you were there. Did you go to get interviews?
I didn't really, because it was created by John Phillips, Derek Taylor. It's kind of foggy in my brain.
I think Lou Adler.
Lou Adler.
Yep.
Thank you. So, because they were the foundation, they built it. I was privy to that information early on. It's like I never heard about Woodstock until Woodstock was over, and yet I had all kinds of people that I knew well, and to this day I wonder, how come nobody mentioned that to me? I might have figured out a way to go back and be at Woodstock, but that didn't happen. So certainly the Monterey Pop Festival, to be involved in that from day one. Then I went up there on my own, stayed with my Aunt Anna. She was this incredible artist in Carmel, and every day I'd just take a cab over and spend the entire day until it closed at night. And there was a press section right in the front, so I was literally in the front row all the time. So while I did wander backstage, visit with people, I got a lot of great photographs. It wasn't the kind of atmosphere where you'd say, can I have you over here for 15 minutes and talk? Everybody was celebrating. Anyone who wasn't on stage was either in the audience or backstage or watching what was going on the stage, because they admired whoever was on before them, after them.
Right.
It was kind of a rock and roll love fest for the performers as much as the audience. So that was what was going on. So everybody was just casual, friendly, everybody taking pictures of one another. I have pictures of me taking pictures of Brian Jones. It was like no other event that I've ever experienced. So I felt very fortunate to be a part of that.
We're back talking with Ann Moses, editor of Tiger Beat magazine from 1966 to 1972. Ann, readers of Tiger Beat most likely bought the magazine to catch up with their favorite pop stars and heartthrobs, people like Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Dave Clark Five.
Very true.
Yeah, Elvis Presley by 67 or so was sort of out of the picture, and yet in the photos of you and Elvis, you look as if Prince Charming just came in the room, and you're staring.
And that's exactly how I felt at the moment too.
And you're beaming. It's sort of like Herman's Hermits. Forget them. That's that's the expression on your face. How did you develop that kind of relationship or begin reporting about Elvis?
Well, it was funny. I would attribute most of it to the PR person at RCA Records. His name was Graylin Landon. Mm-hmm. He was I don't know if he had graduated from college, but in those days he was still your suit-wearing record executive, that wore wingtip shoes and walked around RCA performing his duties. But in doing that, RCA, of course, was always Elvis's record label.
Right.
And in the very, very early years, he would do anything he could to try and get publicity for Elvis. He was really such a hard worker. So he would call me and say, I've got tickets to the opening night of Live a Little, Love a Little, or I've got tickets to Speedway, Elvis's new movie,
Right.
Do you want them? Well, I could have cared less because, I was an Elvis fan when I was 10 years old, and he was singing Hound Dog on the Milton Berle show.
Mm-hmm.
The minute I heard Love Me Do, forget about it.
Right.
I was all about the British invasion. I was like every other 15, 16-year-old in America just going, the Beatles. And so I promptly forgot about Elvis. Well, I really forgot about him when he went off to Germany. But I had two close friends from high school. Don and Tony were Elvis nuts. And they would drive over to my house in high school. They'd say, let's go out and get a Coke. And all they would do is play Elvis music and sing Elvis songs all the time. They were just Elvis nuts. So one of them was in college by this time. The other one had gone to Vietnam and was back. And so I would just call them up and say, do you want to go see this? And they go, yes, that's great. And so I'd give the tickets away. Then I got to know Graylin, and he introduced me to Harry Nilsson, and little by little, I would do favors for him, and it was pretty one-sided for a while. He would say, would you write about this new person, Harry Nilsson, and put him in Tiger Beat? Well, it was like, nobody's heard of him, and we became friends, Harry and I, and I adored his work, but he got very little coverage in Tiger Beat because he wasn't a teenage star or anything like that. So finally, Graylin called up one night, and he said, I've got these two tickets. I really think you should go to this. And I said, what is it? And he said, well, it's kind of a surprise. It's a secret taping of a TV show. You really want to go. And he gave me two tickets. So Don was out of town camping with his family. Tony was in town going to college. So I called up Tony and said, do you want to go to this thing with me? And I didn't know what it was, but, Graylin really impressed upon me that I didn't want to miss this. Well, it turned out it was the 68 comeback special.
Right.
And I not only got to, be in the audience, but then I was one of the ones chosen to be down on the stage watching Elvis perform in his black leather suit. And I just became a fan all over again.
Because
so
I see
that was it. I mean, this was definitely a new Elvis.
Right.
I mean, he looked hot. He sang incredibly. And the fact, hearing him sing live, they're so close, from 2 feet away in the studio, and they weren't pre-recorded. They were recording it live with the guys on the stage playing their instruments. and his voice was amazing. So there I was, a super fangirl again. So at that point in time, I was like starting to place the calls to Grayling. Can you get me this? Can I do that? And lo and behold, of course, he arranged for me to have front row seats for his first live appearance in 1969 at the International. And that the picture of which you speak, where I'm looking at him with goo-goo eyes, that was at his press conference following that first live performance in 1969. And so after, and I have other pictures of me at the press conference, because I attended that, I attended the live show. It was, it was a magical, once-in-a-lifetime night. And at the very end of the press conference, they said, anyone who'd like to have a photo taken with Elvis, get in line. Of course, I was probably third in line. And there you go. So, yes, it was my big moment. And I had no idea I would have the opportunity to meet him after that, although I did. And I write about that in detail in my book.
Now, two observations. On the 68 comeback special, they sort of superimpose Elvis as he's singing, I believe it's Memories.
Correct.
And they superimpose your face.
No, actually, it was Can't Help Falling in Love.
Oh, Can't Help Falling in Love. That's right.
Which was my favorite Elvis song.
Because the expression on your face as I watch it, it's like, yes, Elvis is singing this song to me. You look mesmerized.
I was, and I would have never dreamed in a million years that I would end up in the final cut of the television show, and my face would be on the TV screen beside Elvis.
And if that wasn't enough, you also appeared in the 1970 concert film, Elvis, That's the Way It Is. Yes,
I was asked to participate in it. So there's the original. Now there's a 2 DVD set with both versions. The original one where they interview lots of different fans. The two girls that call their cat Elvis and or Tinkerbell, and then there's just a variety of fans that they interviewed, and they interviewed me in my office at Tiger Beat. Of course, I was petrified. So the interview sounds like I'm kind of choked up about Elvis, but really I'm just scared to death to have a camera rolling.
But you're right. They made a new edit of the film and took you out of it.
Yeah, and all the fans. They instead they put in more footage from the original taping, which I'm sure is valuable to every Elvis fan because they didn't get to see those performances. I mean, I probably went back 5 times during that period to different shows in 70 and 71. So for the fans, I think it was a wise move. I thought that my part in the original would be lost forever. I still had a videotape of it because they issued it on video, the original, but then lo and behold, this last year, they released the 2 DVD set, and I think, I don't know how many CDs are in the set, I think 6, and they asked me if they could reproduce my interview with director Dennis Sanders for the liner notes. So that complete interview is in that 2 DVD set, and I was very proud to be part of it still.
See, you're still promoting Elvis all these years later.
Who would have thought?
Right.
There was a guy said one.
We're talking with Ann Moses, editor of Tiger Beat magazine from 1966 to 1972. And we talked about Elvis Presley, but I wonder about the Beatles. Did you ever have any interaction with them?
Not too much. They did appear at Dodger Stadium in, I think it was summer of '66. I'd have to look up my blog post about it. But they did appear at Dodger Stadium, and because I was working for Tiger Beat, I was in the front row of their press conference at Capitol Records.
Oh, okay.
But I never met them individually. I was in the front row of their press conference. Oddly enough, I have so many 6 degrees of separation stories. You would, they could make a book. But at that press conference, my brother, who was going to USC, and he was in dental school, and his friend, they had signed up to be rent-a-cops, and when the Stones were in town, they got to be bodyguards or, security guards for the Stones. And then their boss called him up, and he said, I want you specifically to come, to this address and blah, blah, blah. And it happened to be 1 week after John Lennon had made his famous statement about, the Beatles are bigger than Christ.
Right.
And, of course, my name is Ann Moses. My brother's name was Jack Moses. And then his friend's name was Jimmy Christ, spelled Christ. And so, therefore, I got pictures of them on either side of the Beatles. They ended up getting trapped under Dodger Stadium for 2 hours after the concert because they could not figure out a way to get them out of there. They had armored vehicles, and fans had let the air out of the armored vehicles, out of the tires. And, so it took them 2 hours to figure out how to safely get them out of there. And the whole time they spent with Jimmy and my brother. So my brother has incredible memories. But, and then I wrote a huge story for the New Musical Express in England, Moses and Christ Guard the Beatles. Even though I never got to meet them, someone very close to me did. So it's pretty cool.
We're back as we wrap up our interview with Ann Moses, editor of Tiger Beat magazine, and I have kind of a silly question for you, I guess. Mm-hmm. The name Tiger Beat. Now, at the time, young ladies would refer to good-looking guys as Tiger. A beat reporter, you're on the beat covering the Tigers. Is that what that name refers to?
I honestly can't tell you how they came up with the name. I have issue number 1, which was September of 65. I have the issues up until my first story appeared, and then I have all the issues from when I started working there. I have them bound in leather by year, and I'm very proud of my collection. But it started out, Chuck Laufer had been the publisher of Teen Magazine, and he sold and started Tiger Beat, but it was kind of an unknown entity, the teen pop magazines as opposed to the teen fashion magazines. So he paid Lloyd Thaxton, who had a national dance show every day on television. And so for the first year's issue was Lloyd Thaxton's Tiger Beat.
Oh, okay.
And where they came up, their artist that they had the whole time I was there, he had done the Tiger Beat logo, and there was a little tiger on the cover, which was somewhat like 16. They had a lot of cartoon characters.
Right.
So I don't know if they were emulating that. I just never had that discussion with them. But boy, it's something that sticks. Whereas I'm not sure Teen Beat would have.
Right. It's interesting, just very briefly, we always hear these stories about how print media is falling off. Newspapers are shutting down and magazines are closing down. And I was in a store the other day here in New Jersey, and as I was leaving, and it was a store that had lots of candy and toys and plushes, and as I was leaving, they had a rack of all these magazines like Bop and all of them with One Direction on the cover. And I thought, if there's ever a sure thing in the magazine publishing world, it has to be that, because young girls are always going to want pictures and stories of their favorite pop stars.
Absolutely. And ironically, the magazine was sold a couple of years after I left, and it was sold to Sterling Publishing. It went public, then it was sold 2 or 3 more times over the next years, and then I think for about the last 7 or 8 years, it has been owned by Chuck Laufer's son. He had 7 children, and his son is publishing it, Tiger Beat, and then they also publish Bop.
Right.
And so they're keeping the family tradition going.
It's amazing. All these years later, it's still going. And it's the Bay City Rollers, then it's Hanson, now it's One Direction. And it's a lot of work to go online, find an image, print it out, and then put it on your wall. You could just pick up a magazine. Some young girl could pick it up. There's all the stuff. She could put the pictures on the wall, and it's just never going to go out of style.
No, you're absolutely right. And actually, in about the last 2 years that I was with Tiger Beat, so 70 to 72, Chuck Lawfer, the publisher, realized that of course they were buying it for the articles and the latest news and all that. But predominantly, those girls wanted to pin these gorgeous guys up on their bedroom wall. And so we started by printing on glossy colored paper. We had 16 pages of color. Then we went to more. Then we began to publish posters that were stapled to the middle so you could take them out.
Right.
And then when you pasted four issues, so there was on one side of the picture was a fourth of a giant poster, and then the other three would come the next 3 issues. So you would have literally a life-size poster of your favorite idol, and advertising those, I would hold the big poster up, and it was as tall as I was. I'm 5'2". I mean, they took it as far as it could go. I mean, it was genius.
Right. Everything short of including their hair or something.
Yeah. Oh, well, and we did sell the monkey's hair.
Oh, no.
Okay. And Davy Jones' hair. Well, we did. That was more of Chuck's marketing. I do have a whole chapter in my book on the business of Tiger Beat, because I learned more about marketing in my years with Tiger Beat than I could have in any college marketing course or anywhere else. Chuck was a master marketer, and so it was a great learning experience, along with all the fun.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but nowadays with science, if you have the hair, you can clone monkeys. So we might have a whole army of Davies out there. We might be better off, But thank you so much. It's always a joy to speak with you. And you know what I'd like to see? This just struck me as I'm speaking to you. I'd like to see a sequel, in a way, to Tiger Beat, where you go around and interview these guys now, the same guys you interviewed back then.
I honestly, in my, if you're going to dream big.
Sure.
So in my big dream, when the book is published, then I would love to travel to wherever these people are. Carl Green of Herman's Hermit, he lives in England, but he's working in Chicago right now. Mm-hmm. Peter Tork lives in his family home in Connecticut. And have a YouTube channel where I go and do the interviews with them. Where are they now? But also show their lifestyle, because that was one of the number one stories in Tiger Beat was at home with.
Yes.
And we would show you Davy Jones' home. We would show you whoever, their Dave Clark's bachelor pad in London. And it would be so much fun to bring it up to this age, live interview, real surroundings in real time, and just, wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be.
Take it out of a magazine and put it in the 21st century. Who would like to see, where some of these people are today?
Yes.
And what are they doing? I mean, I went to Jim Harpo Valley's 70th birthday party at his home in Gig Harbor a couple of years ago. And, I mean, this man has traveled the world. He has all these treasures in his home. It's a historic home in Washington. And he's a master gardener. So I got this tour of his garden that is just exquisite. And, he's still an awesome rock and roller, but there's more to him than that. And that's what would be so much fun for me to discover and then share it with everybody on something like that. It would,
Yeah. And you know what you could also do? You could have a magazine with you, and you could say, in this issue from March of 1966, you said you preferred girls who kept quiet. All these years later, do you still agree with that that statement?
I love that component. Yes.
Well,
see what they were thinking as teenagers, and then see how they are today.
Right. Exactly. Well, I want to give people the opportunity to catch up with you, and where would they do that?
Well, my blog is Ann, A-N-N, Moses, MOSES.com, and my Facebook page is /Ann Moses, and I'm trying to keep things interesting.
Well, I think you're doing a heck of a job. It's always interesting to talk with you. You have so many great stories. I think of you as an endless resource that I will be returning to in the near future. I want to have you on again at some point.
Well, I hope so. I'd look forward to that.
Yeah, we always have a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.